Section 24 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J. M. We're Friends Now. Part 3. Beardsley observed him for a prolonged second. "Remember it," he answered softly. Loesch opened his mouth to say more, but Beardsley lifted a palm at the screen and smiled benignly. "Well, sir, I think that about covers it. I want to thank you very much for the record, and, have a nice vacation. Goodbye." And with that, he clicked off abruptly. He turned to face Mandelko, who was struggling between anger and distress as he paced away from the screen and back. He confronted Beardsley with a sad and accusing look. "Now see here, Beardsley, if I'd known your methods were... Don't you think that was all a bit high-handed?" "What? No, not in the least. Didn't you notice?" "Notice what?" "Loesch was an angry man. Yes, indeed." "Angry?" snapped Mandelko. "Good reason." "No," Beardsley mused. "The wrong reason. Murder, at least the type we're concerned with, is a form of release, you know? A killer may commit his deed in anger, but once the thing is accomplished, he never retains that anger long." Beardsley gazed contemplatively at the screen. "You know, I admire that man. I really do. He had the convictions, at least, if not the courage." Mandelko pounced on that. "Then you think Loesch is an innocent?" "I didn't say that." Beardsley paused in a strange hesitation. His eyes had gone remote beneath the very thick glasses, and his words came slow and isolated. "But he's part of the record. Yes, it should be quite a record. In fact, I have a feeling, you know, that this case is going to stand as a monument in the annals of crime." Mandelko stared at him, searched for the meaning there, and then gave up. Why had he ever committed himself to this situation anyways? Did this little man really know as much as he pretended, or was he merely fumbling around in the dregs of a forgotten past? To be sure, Beardsley was a pathetic enough figure, and the man had once been great in his field, and there was something about him even now. There was the sudden way Beardsley had of losing his abstracted look, the eyes beneath those ridiculous lenses coming to a sharp, bright focus, with tiny, livening flecks in the gray of the iris, and the way the change lifted his features from mediocrity to the alertness of a terrier. It was absurd, it was farcical, and it was all very disturbing. "You told me," Mandelko said testily, "that the killer was someone Carmack trusted enough to have in his home. Then you bludgeoned Loesch with the idea it was a person Carmack had reason to fear. It would seem to me, Beardsley..." No. I think my words to Loesch were, assuming the killer was such a person." Beardsley looked up brightly, and even through those lenses, Mandelko could see the sharp focus. "Just the same, I fail to see what's to be gained by these outlandish methods." Beardsley seemed genuinely surprised. "But I've gained a great deal already. And don't forget, Mrs. Carmack and Pedersen should be here soon." "That's a prospect I look forward to." Mandelko tried to salvage a modicum of humor and failed miserably. He extracted a cigar, clamped his teeth upon it, frowned, and glanced at his watch. He strode over and peered out at the operations room. Beardsley said innocuously, "I wouldn't count on ECA IAC just yet." It was Beardsley's first error. He realized it instantly. The remark seemed to trigger something in Mandelko. The Minister of Justice turned slowly, rolling the cigar from one corner of his mouth to the other. "But I may," he said. "You know, I just may. It's barely possible, Beardsley, that with some luck we'll be able to dispense with your talents." He said it with considerable more relish than conviction and moved for the door. "I think I'll just go see how Arnold is making out." Arnold was making out very well, much to Mandelko's delight. No longer was there chaos and confusion. The new feedback unit had arrived and installation was well underway. Blueprints were spread out as a crew of techs worked feverishly at all damaged areas. "It looks promising." Arnold hurried up to greet him. "Told you I had a good crew here. Look, see this?" He indicated one of the variant tapes being slowly reversed across the relays. "What is it?" "The number 8 reject." "That what caused the trouble?" "Well, we think so, but it's problematical. Whether it did or not, we're safe in resuming the run without any shift in the correlation total." Mandelko stared at the number 8. "Throw it out," he snapped. "What? What did you say, sir?" "I said throw it out. Get this thing to functioning." Arnold was aghast. "But," he gulped, "we can't just throw out data. Sure, it was about to be a reject, but everything, even rejects, contain a factor balance. You know that, sir." Mandelko got control of himself with an effort. Yes, of course. I know you're right, but damn it, man. Those units cost something like $80,000. Suppose the same breakdown occurs. Not a chance of it this time. We'll merely continue with a stepped-up synaptic check. Take longer for cumulative, perhaps, but absolutely foolproof once we... For a long instant, Mandelko stood musing. Then he nodded brusquely. "All right. How long to get going?" "Why, we'll be ready in 40 minutes at the most. I told you I had a good crew, sir. Excuse me." One of Arnold's techs was motioning to him. "Excuse me," Arnold said again and hurried away to consult with the man. 40 minutes. Mandelko couldn't believe it. He chortled happily and swung about to greet Beardsley, who approached at that moment. "Hear that, Beardsley? 40 minutes. Excellent man, Arnold. I'm sorry I ever doubted." Beardsley wasn't listening. He stared about at the miracle of reconstruction, and there was more of amazement on his face than distress. Adjusting his glasses, he gazed thoughtfully at Jeff Arnold's retreating figure. Mandelko was saying, "Just as well your little experiment didn't go any further. Dangerous precedent. Don't know what possessed me. You realize in the last analysis I'll have to put my faith in ECA-IAC. No bad feelings?" "No, sir," Beardsley pronounced somberly. "No bad feelings, because I'm holding you to your word. ECA-IAC hasn't solved your case, and it never will." Mandelko stood still, open-mouthed. "What's that?" "Nonsense! Arnold just assured me." "He assured you of nothing. I'm more convinced than ever now. I'm the only one who can solve this case, and I'm holding you to your word." Mandelko seemed undecided whether to laugh or censure. His heavy fingers opened and closed aimlessly as he stared across the room at Arnold and back at Beardsley. Finally, his teeth snapped together. "Beardsley," he choked, "I warn you, if this is some sort of trickery..." Beardsley shook his head solemnly. "You do well to believe me, sir. I was never more serious." "So you're determined to go on with it? Very well, Beardsley. You have something like 40 minutes, and believe me, you better prove yourself. May I remind you," fraught with meaning, his voice bordered on anticipation, "may I remind you, Beardsley, that already you've given sufficient cause for a complete review of your qualifications as coordinator." Beardsley looked at him and smiled. "Yes, sir." "And may I remind you, sir," he nodded toward the far door, "that your guests have arrived." Mrs. Carmack, Beardsley thought as he watched her, was that rare type of woman who could defy all of the current conventions of style and carry it off successfully. Her type of beauty was ostentatious and yet vibrant. She was dressed impeccably in black and silver. Her hair was authentic honey blonde in a coronet braid, and her face possessed that pure line of profile together with the quality of translucence one sees in rare porcelain. Sheila Carmack was 35, and she paid her beauticians that many thousands annually to keep her looking 15 years younger. Just now she seemed in buoyant good spirits as she greeted Mandelko. Not so the young man who accompanied her. The escort was a person Beardsley had never seen before, quite handsome and quite aware of it, with an impudent world wisdom centered about his sharp eyes. He turned immediately to Mandelko with a bluster as phony as it was towering. "This is an outrage, sir, a damned outrage. On Sheila's behalf, I deplore these tactics, and I question your right. Our entire afternoon perfectly ruined." "Correction, darling," purred Mrs. Carmack. "You mean our perfect afternoon entirely ruined." She turned, smiling, to the Minister of Justice. "You really mustn't mind Victor." "Hello, Sheila," Mandelko greeted her wanly. "I must apologize for the inconvenience, but I assure you—" "Oh, but this is thrilling. I mean, really." Mrs. Carmack was gazing about ECA-IAC's room with considerable more delight than suspicion, and Beardsley, watching her, was thinking, thrilling. Could she really mean it? She must surely be aware of ECA-IAC's task for today. Today of all days. He glanced uneasily down the room and saw that Jeff Arnold was much too occupied to have noticed the newcomers. He gestured to Mandelko, who finally took the hint and escorted the visitors into the privacy of the office. There, Mandelko offered drinks, but the young man named Victor refused his, preferring to maintain his air of injured dignity. Mandelko sighed and gave an accusing look at Beardsley. "I know this is unusual," he apologized to Sheila, "but I am rather hopeful that you may find it entertaining." He gave a slight sardonic emphasis to the last word. "If you'll just bear with me until our other guest arrives." Victor had been awaiting his chance. "Another! Really? We're guests, Sheila, do you hear that?" He looked at Mandelko with immense disdain, gave a pert tilt of his head, and surveyed the room with a grimace of distaste. "And just how long are we to be detained in this... Beardsley's fist itched to splatter those handsome features around a little. Instead, he strode forward and said bluntly, "That'll do it, Sonny. Who the hell are you anyway?" The handsome face sneered at him. "I am Victor Darlan, and I am a good friend of Sheila's, of the family," he corrected. "We were on our way to the concert when those impertinent men detained us. To think we must forego Perrault's Fifth Color Concerto for subchromatics in favor of this." Sheila's eyes danced with tolerant amusement. "Victor, please. This promises to be much more exciting. I'm sure Mr. Mandelko knows what he's about, and—" Wide and curious, her gaze went to Beardsley and lingered there. Belatedly, Mandelko made the introductions. "Perhaps I should explain," he gave an improvident laugh, "that Mr. Beardsley's role at the moment is, a little beyond the ordinary. That is, He paused miserably, and then was saved for the moment as all eyes turned toward the door. Brooke Pedersen had arrived, and the attention of everyone was drawn to him. The effect was startling. The telecolumnist was a tall, dour, and bushy-browed man who took a perverse sort of pride in the impression he gave of shabbiness. He slouched wordlessly into the room, hands thrust deep in the pockets of a makeshift jacket, but there was nothing shabby about the man's perceptive and analytic mind. Beardsley remembered. True, Pedersen had fallen from the heights since the ECA-IAC debacle, but his retirement from the limelight was more studied than sullen, and could only have been his own choosing. Lately he'd emerged again, and with all of his old news sense and political acumen, he was making his presence felt. He was a man of considered but lightning mood, who, when asked for an opinion, invariably gave an argument. Beardsley observed him shrewdly. From the depths of his mind came a warning, a restless unease that took root and blossomed into turbulence. This man will bear special watching. Pedersen came on into the room, nodded dourly at Mandelko, no love lost there, and remained alertly silent. For the merest instant he met Beardsley's gaze, and there was a definite challenge and something of mockery. Damn him, thought Beardsley. He knows why he's here. But how could he know? He's aware that he's on the tapes, too. even one of the primes. And he doesn't give a damn. Mandelko finished the introductions quickly and took over. It was plain that he wanted to get through with this, but at the same time, Beardsley sensed that he was no longer quite so sure of Jeff Arnold and ECA IAC. Above all things, Mandelko had to avoid any hint of trouble with ECA IAC, and he managed that with an adroitness that bordered on the cunning. After some glowing comments on Beardsley's past esteemed record, with pointed emphasis on the pre-ECA IAC era, he ended with a truly inspirational touch. Let's just say, then, that you've been invited here in the interest of an experiment which Crime Central has been contemplating for some time, an inquiry into, certain facets of past investigatory methods. Crude as it may seem to you, certain factors may be forthcoming here, psychologic and devorational, which may later be refined, analyzed, and integrated into the operational function of ECA IAC. Beardsley stared at Mandelko. It was altogether a neat sidestep, and he almost admired him for it. Please understand, this is a necessary adjunct to the true development of ECA IAC. We shall have here two divergent lines of approach within parallel fields. Actually, each of you will be an important co-aid in this experiment. I would like you to cooperate fully with Mr. Beardsley's line of approach. Vintage 60, he added for their amusement. The reaction was immediate and varied. Victor Darlin examined his fingernails and registered aristocratic boredom. Pedersen slouched up against the desk, seeming amused at Mandelko's pitch, but he wasn't watching Mandelko. The gaze he fastened on Beardsley said plainer than words that he was quite aware of the situation. Only Sheila Carmack seemed fascinated as she sat a bit straighter in her chair and peered brightly across her drink. It was obvious that she, for one, was taken in. "Why, I wouldn't missed it for the world," she sparkled. "Just like, in those, what did they call them? Whodunits. It's actually thrilling." "It's archaic," Darlin sneered. "It's heroic," said Pedersen, his gaze still on the little coordinator. "Beardsley, I hope you pull it off. I actually do. Always did think you were twice the man ECA IAC is." Beardsley moved forward, not smiling. "Thanks," he said. "In that case, you won't mind if I begin with you." "With me?" Pedersen stared, then laughed suddenly and without mirth. "Skip it, Beardsley. I know your methods, and I can tell you right now it won't get you any." Beardsley stopped him. "Pedersen," he said, "as of now we agree on just one thing. I also think I'm twice the man. The only difference is that I'm man enough to really believe it." He paused and watched him absorb that. "It's going to be ECA IAC or Vintage 60, Pedersen. Your choice." It was at once a rebuff and a challenge. Pedersen then straightened up slowly. A muscle in his face flinched, and then he smiled, with all but his eyes. "All right," he snapped. "We'll begin with me. I'll fill you in plenty. You want to know if I saw Carmack on the day of the murder? I did. The louse put through a vis call to me. Insisted I come out and see him." "Whoa. Now, just a minute. You wouldn't say this was a friendly visit?" "I'll get to that." Pedersen's words came fast and clipped. "You know how I fought the ECA IAC lobby? I fought it long and hard, and when I lost, it finished me with the public. But I wasn't through. I began digging up every fact I could about Carmack. Took me a few years, but worth it. Most of it smelled. Ask Professor Loesch, he'll tell you." "I've already spoken with Loesch," Beardsley said quietly. "He managed to convey his sentiments pretty thoroughly." "Good. Then try talking to him." Pedersen nodded venomously at Mandelko. "Ask Mandelko how the great Carmack managed to get those patents through. I can tell you he didn't do it alone. Oh, I've dug plenty." "Why, you—" Mandelko gave a snort of anger and started forward, but Beardsley managed to forestall him. He gazed sternly at the telecolumnist. "I think we're all aware of your considerable talent for digging, Pedersen. ECAIAC too, he added pointedly, for we already have it on the tapes. Pedersen bristled. Sure you have it. My past connection, my opposition to the lobby, even my digging maybe. But you don't have it all. How do you equate hate, Beardsley? Is that on your tapes? Beardsley could have told him that it was indeed on the tapes, but he only shook his head. No, he said slowly, we don't have it all. Not ECAIAC, nor I, nor any of us. And that's the eternal pity of it. But I'd like to try. The sum and the substance, Pedersen. Don't you understand me? Just once before I'm through. It was the voice, some secret and subtle thing in the voice that reached out and gripped Pedersen and bore meaning with it. He stood quite motionless, staring at Beardsley. For a split second his eyes widened, then disbelief gave way to something of comprehension, admiration. Beardsley, he said softly, you fool. You utter damn fool. Oblivious of the others, then, he turned and began to pace. All right, here it is. Carmack called me out to see him. He'd gotten wind of what I was up to and offered to buy me off. Pedersen laughed bitterly. Wasn't even subtle about it. Said he liked my stuff and would like to see me at the top again where I belonged. Said he could arrange for me to step into a top job at Central Telecast. Providing, of course, I could manage to, forget certain little items I'd uncovered. Pedersen was doing all right. Beardsley gave him his lead. He actually thought it would be that simple. I refused him outright, and of course he couldn't believe it. A man like that. We dropped all pretense. There were some bitter words. Beardsley said quickly, Could you elaborate? Oh, I don't remember exactly. He went venomous. I suppose there were threats. I told him he hadn't enough money or influence to buy what I knew, and that when I had it properly documented, I intended to make a national scandal of it. Pedersen halted abruptly. You know, it occurred to me later that was a foolhardy thing to say. Ah, why is that? Well, I had heard of that safeguard of his, the neurovibe, and I suppose there were other things too. He was a cautious man, a dangerous man, but, Pedersen shrugged, he let me into his home readily enough. Beardsley lifted a finger. Because he was confident he was going to buy you. Wouldn't you say? I suppose that's it. Maybe I was lucky to get out of there so easily. Anyway, I did. Pedersen stopped pacing and his gaze bored into Beardsley's. So, now to the big question. Yes, he was alive when I left him. No, I never saw Carmack again. I went straight to my office and worked until well past midnight. By the way, I have ample proof of that. Yes, I'm sure you do. What were your feelings at this point? My feelings? I knew my life was in danger now. Carmack would be out to stop me. I don't mind admitting that I was, rather relieved when I heard the news. Ah, and when did you hear it? Pedersen glared, but his answer was quick. Late the next afternoon, of course. By habit, I work late hours and sleep long. With an air of finality, he threw a challenging look around. I want to congratulate whoever did it, and I don't much care whether the answer comes from you or ECAIAC. Beardsley surveyed him solemnly. Pedersen had little more than brushed the surface, but it was enough. It served to set the pattern. He could have sworn Pedersen was aware of that. He said dryly, Thanks, Pedersen. Your story is very pat. He turned to the others. Mandelko rather surprised him, seeming not so much disturbed as he was engrossed in deep thought. As for Mrs. Carmack, Beardsley saw that the comedy had gone out of it for her, but she tried to keep up the veneer. This is almost interesting, she sparkled, placing her glass down carefully and turning to face him. Am I to be next, Mr. Beardsley? Shall I give both the questions and the answers as Mr. Pedersen did? No, Mrs. Carmack, I'll do that. I took note a moment ago that you mentioned the whodunits. You must be familiar with them, say as a hobby? It wasn't at all what she expected. She stood wide-eyed and startled. This is also thrilling, remember? Vintage 60. As the whodunits will tell you, one of the prime requisites is an accounting and proof of your whereabouts at the time of the deed. Well? Beardsley's voice was just edged enough to throw her into confusion. Why, she faltered. You mean that night? What, no alibi? You don't even remember? According to Vintage 60, that could mean either complete innocence or extreme cunning. Beware the suspect who is clever enough to be ready with no alibi. Beardsley saw her stiffen. There was a change across her face, a struggle beneath the eyes. But then, he shrugged, it's always been my conviction that motive rather than opportunity is the real requisite. On that basis, it's plain you couldn't have killed your husband. You loved him. He was only 58. He only left you $12 million, but you loved him, and you were faithful. Anyone can see that after 7 weeks, you're still all broken up over it. The veneer was gone now. Sheila Carmack's eyes were vicious pools of hate, her mouth a grimace. Why, you ridiculous little monster. Victor Darlin stepped forward belligerently. Say now, look here, this is all very... Beardsley placed a hand on Darlin's chest and shoved. The latter stumbled back with mouth agape. Pedersen was gazing at Beardsley with delight and admiration, seeming to visualize this little man as material for his next telecolumn. Mandelko stood transfixed, a monument of agony, twisting a fist into his palm. Beardsley, stop it! This ridiculous farce has gone far enough. I warned you about these tactics. Beardsley said, Shut up. And Mandelko stood there with mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Well, Mrs. Carmack, answer me. You loved your husband, didn't you? For the past 10 minutes you've heard him maligned. I should think you'd want to protect his very good name. Sheila, I must advise you against making any statement of whatever nature. Mandelko strode for the telestat, then turned back and pointed a trembling finger at Beardsley. This man, he choked, this man is no longer acting in any official capacity for Crime Central. With a quick step, Pedersen got himself between Mandelko and the telestat. He strolled over to the instrument and leaned against it with a knowing look at Beardsley. Sheila Carmack tilted her chin in defiance. But I wish to answer this man. I insist on answering. Loved Amos Carmack? Love him? Her voice rose a full octave and broke in stridence. For the past 9 years, I have hated his guts. For a long moment, the room was silent. No one moved. Beardsley's thick glasses glinted eerily as he peered around at them, from Mandelko to Sheila to Pedersen and back to Mandelko. Well now, he said, this is remarkable, most remarkable. Everyone hated Carmack. Professor Loesch, we know why. Pedersen here, he's told us why. His wife, I think it's obvious. Who else? Surely not you, Mandelko. Carmack was a pal of yours. You backed his cause with ECA-IAC. You lobbied for him. You even stole patents for him. I wonder what persuasion he held over you to bring all that about. Or is persuasion too mild a word? Vintage 60 had a better term for it. Slowly, through the murk of his agitation, Mandelko seized a measure of control. He gazed at Beardsley out of cold, incalculable eyes, now hooded with dire intention. You're really trying hard, aren't you? He grated. Well, make the most of it, because I guarantee you won't be around. Not after the next annual basic. Do you understand that, Mr. Coordinator? But Beardsley was watching Pedersen now, whose face took on a sudden febrile gleam. Blackmail. By God, Beardsley, that's it, and I have the proof. Sure, it was Carmack I was after, but I dug out a lot more. Pedersen shot a challenging look at the Minister of Justice. It goes back some years, but I can prove that Amos Carmack had enough on Mandelko to finish him politically any time he chose. You can bet your life Mandelko hated him, enough to warrant murder." There was an odd, illogical delight in the way Pedersen said it, and something almost frightening the way Mandelko just stood there in cold silence, gazing at the telecolumnist with a look of boundless regret. Beardsley said very softly, "Thanks, Pedersen, but I'd suggest you save it. It's scarcely pertinent now." "Not pertinent, but man, I tell you, I have proof. What better motive would you—" "Motive?" Beardsley hit him with a pitying glance. "Why, I thought it was obvious. We've progressed beyond motives now." Again there was an electric silence, and Beardsley let it assimilate. "I have said," he went on, "that all this is most remarkable, but you know the really remarkable thing?" He paused and watched them. Mandelko continued to grind a fist into his palm. Pedersen straightened attentively, and Arlen, sneering no longer, moved over to stand beside Sheila Carmack. "The really remarkable thing is this. I am now ready to state unequivocally that the person who killed Amos Carmack didn't hate him at all." A thought was throbbing through the room like the seconds passing, quick and cumulative, almost embodied. It made transition from stunned mind to startled mind as Beardsley stood there blinking at them. Beardsley really didn't mind. They just couldn't know how subtly he worked into his themes. Taking advantage of the lull, he went over to the door and peered out into the operations room. He peered long and soberly, then turned. Mandelko had found his voice first, perplexity pushing down his anger. "Beardsley, either you're bereft of your senses or—" "Do you mean to say," he choked, "after going to these preposterous lengths, do you mean to say that no one here—" "Just a moment." To everyone's surprise, it was Arlen who broke in. "I'm not sure what's going on here. Not sure at all, but I want to make one thing quite clear. Sheila had no complicity in this crime. I know because—" He hesitated, touched her gently on the arm. "Sorry, darling, I've got to say it. I know because she was with me that night." Sheila was startled for a moment, then utterly scathing. "You needn't lie for me, Victor. I appreciate your sense of the dramatic, and even your motives, but I assure you they are both misplaced. I have never heard such nonsense." Darlin looked more desolate than abashed. As for Beardsley, he was only a little amused. "Well now, this is really more than I deserve. In all my years on homicide, I wanted to experience this, but I finally put it down as a myth. The noble alibi." He peered sharply. "True vintage, right out of the whodunits. Wouldn't you agree, Mrs. Carmack?" The answer didn't come, and Beardsley went on sternly. "And you reject his noble attempt on your behalf. That is interesting, especially as it occurs to me that Darlin's effort is just a little delayed." He paused, gazing thoughtfully upward. "It's enough to make one wonder whether his noble effort is designed to protect you or himself." Darlin suddenly paled, as if he had just been kicked in the stomach. He gulped heavily and tried to speak. Beardsley watched stolidly for a moment, then dismissed him with a gesture of complete disgust. "Oh, hell, never mind. I would say neither. The lady is right, Sonny. You better watch those impulses. You just aren't the type." Mandelko had been hanging on to every word, grimly intent. He was sure Beardsley was getting somewhere at last. Now he straightened, and his grinding fist indicated that he'd had quite enough. Without a word, even without a deigning glance at Beardsley, he traversed the office with great purposeful strides and slammed through the outer door into ECA IAC's room, and was back an instant later trailing Jeff Arnold as the latter brushed past him into the office. Mandelko was saying something urgently, tugging at Arnold's arm. Arnold ignored him. His startled gaze was on the little group. "Sheila!" He took a step forward. "Sheila, what are you doing here?" I wish you'd tell me, Jeff. I wish someone would explain what this is all about. Beardsley watched the tableau in silence. Jeff Arnold's gaze flicked to Darlin, who stared back with insolence, and there was no mistaking the hostility that leapt between the two. Sheila noticed it too, and there was an indecisive moment that mounted toward panic. Beardsley watched her churning effort to control it. She said quickly, an inflection of fear in her voice, "Mr. Beardsley, if it really matters, my whereabouts that night, you'll understand my reluctance to say it before. I was with Jeff. Truly, I'm sure he will tell you." The words were directed at Beardsley, but she was talking to Jeff Arnold. And deliberately, almost brutally, Arnold refused to accept the cue. Beardsley saw the pleading turn to apprehension in Sheila's eyes. "But, Jeff, you remember? Surely you do. Jeff, you don't understand. You must tell them." End of section 24.